I was there and I thought, okay, it appears that Ghanaian stories are missing in the true crime content creation space.
One thing we've seen is that all the statistics point to the fact that a lot more Ghanaians are consuming audio on demand, which is essentially what podcasts are.
These things actually happened to real people. There were families that were affected, and some people's lives have been altered because of situations that have happened in each episode.
What we wanted to do with Mayhem was actually find a way to document and canonicalize the crime stories that have happened in Ghana.
I kind of created a specific character for Mayhem. It's more of a facet of myself.
I'll go for the fact that it became the #1 true crime podcast in Ghana at some time.
If you don't take care of yourself in this country that we live in and somebody kills you, you and your family may probably never get justice.
Lock your doors. This is Mayhem.
Lock your doors. This is Mayhem.
Always make sure to lock your doors because this is Mayhem.
Lock your doors. This is Mayhem.
I think for any media house, it's all about adaptation and shifting to where the listeners are moving to. One thing we've seen is that all the statistics point to the fact that a lot more Ghanaians are consuming audio on demand, which is essentially what podcasts are. So for us at Media General, and specifically us at the digital arm of Media General, podcasts are a thing that we're looking into a lot. So you see a lot more of our shows available on demand. So Johnny's Bites, you see Daily Beat, you see things like Keeping It Real from 3FM that are all available now on demand. And we are also creating specific shows, new shows like Mayhem, for instance, that are exclusively available only as podcasts across different platforms.
So I would say that I came up with this true crime idea because of my love for true crime. I was there and I thought, okay, it appears that Ghanaian stories of true crime are missing in the true crime content creation space. So it's an idea that has been marinating in my head for a couple of years, but I had never really had, I guess, maybe the motivation to really, go solo on this in terms of, production and putting content out there. And then I joined Media General. It was nice working with Senna. We've worked together before. So this was another, great opportunity to work with him. And then when I had the confidence to mention it to him that, Senna, I think this is what we should do, and we should focus on Ghanaian cases because nobody's talking about Ghanaian cases in the podcast world, in the true crime world. So, Senna knows and can sense a brilliant idea when he hears one or when he sees one. Immediately he was like, okay, let's do this. Who can we bring on board? Because we needed to do some research on these cases. We needed to do some writing on these cases. So immediately he put a team together, and here we are today. I had to leave. I had to leave for school, but I think that the team handling it, brilliant. Brilliant, and I'm glad that they are as passionate as I was when this started. And I think that the potential for it to blow up is just starting.
What we wanted to do with Mayhem was actually find a way to document and canonicalize the crime stories that have happened in Ghana. Really, these things that have really shaken the country to its core, or even brought out some sort of different ideas of what people would expect to be. For example, the story of Zelia, it's not something that you would see as common. It's something we all know can happen, But I don't think I personally have even heard of that before. So just knowing that these stories are out there and being able to go a bit deeper into it really also makes people aware of what can happen, what crimes can be committed. The story of Atayi and how we went a bit deep into it and really found out some more information, got to speak to people to also just realize how did they feel living in that space, can let even the listeners know, okay, when it is this particular time, I should not pass in the darkness at this space. So there's that sort of additional crime prevention awareness that just shedding a light on the crime stories that we do with Mayhem will also bring to the general populace.
I would say that research is the most challenging thing when we are working on episodes or when we are working on some cases, because believe me, they are not available information online. So you have to look out for credible sources, expert opinions, or court documents in order to get accurate information. Because with Mayhem, I practice the principle of verification. We have to be sure that we don't give out false information online. I mean, this is a big platform, and so we have to make sure that everyone gets the information that they need. So I think the big challenge for me is drawing a thin line between sensationalism and maintaining audience engagement. That is the most challenging part for me, because I have to make sure that the audience are still engaged in this particular episode and avoid sensationalism, because these things actually happen to real people. There were families that were affected, and some people's lives have been altered because of situations that have happened in each episode and in each story, in each of the cases. So you have to find a thin line. Make sure that you are not also churning out sensitive information that can harm any of the people involved. So I think that's the challenge for me there, doing that and also maintaining audience engagement, but we've had it on lock all through the season.
How did you navigate the emotional intensity of the true crime stories presented in your podcast throughout the season?
Emotional intensity. So these stories, you have to, as the host, you have to be a neutral gray almost. You have to take everything for what it was and present it as what it was. You don't try to sugarcoat much, even though sometimes I try to be as careful as I can be with how I frame things for the sake of sensitivity. It's not a fairy tale. Most of these stories talk about death. And so I have to do my very best to be as factual as I can be, and the facts are already there with the help of my producer and everybody else, but I have to be a neutral gray at all times.
I think that, as a journalist, I always say that it's important to respect people's stories. People trust us with their stories, and sometimes we can be very reckless with it in terms of how maybe we sensationalize it, in terms of how we don't even, we are very inconsiderate, when it comes to how people connected to these stories may feel. So in as much as I know that anytime we tell a true crime story, anytime we put content out there, people who knew these people who are connected to the story, it may trigger some things, even for the victims and victims' families, and for the perpetrators and the perpetrators' families. But I think that we have a duty to be very sensitive with how we tell the story. We just need to stick to the facts. We need to stick to the facts, not our feelings. And even if we have to pass a judgment on it in terms of how we feel, we must know that there were real people involved. And we have to be very measured in the way we put out opinions or judgments on these cases. But when we stick to the facts of the case, I don't think we can go wrong.
So media is seen as the fourth arm of government, right? And a lot of the things that happen when it comes to justice and the systems, and even just security systems in the country, are usually kept in small places, right? Oftentimes you find out that unless the crime is really major and goes to become big news, it's not covered by media. What we are trying to do with Mayhem is also sort of democratize that sort of information. So a lot of the research that is done by the producers for Mayhem goes into court documents as much as we can, interviewing people a bit more in depth than what the news would usually cover. Because again, the news cycle is very fast. It's really moving every single day. There's something new to talk about. But with the focus of Mayhem specifically being on crime, what we are making sure here is that a lot more people are beginning to have some sort of awareness or beginning to have some sort of knowledge about these crime stories. And we believe that over time, we are going to sort of democratize and open that, lets people also hear a lot more about it. I believe strongly that one of the key ways to prevent crime from happening is also to open up the space, let a lot more people know what crimes are being committed. Because once people know that this is the crime that was committed, this is how it was committed, they can also, at the back of their mind, be able to tell that a crime is about to be committed if they see similar actions or similar things happening in their community.
We started with ads, which is paid ads on Instagram and then on Facebook. We also use banners. We did a vox pop, creative, video snippets. We had a lot going on. We had articles too, which were SEO optimized. We had a lot to that, but my favorite would be the website banners, because funny enough, we had a lot of impressions, because the banners had to just redirect people to their listening channels, and that was quite a success, considering the target audience on our website. So yeah, that would be my favorite.
I will always tell people that Mayhem takes you on a journey where the host would read out the story for you with the sound effects and everything I mentioned. And you may not be at that particular location, but the audio, what you listen to, takes you right there. You can be in your sitting room, but Mayhem will take you to Bawe, or it will take you to the northern region, and the sound effects, it's paint a good imagery for you, and you have a very good listening experience.
With how I try to get people hooked, there's a few techniques really. I try to make it as immersive as I can, not just in terms of editing with the sound effect suggestions, with the music and everything. It goes beyond that. It goes to the presentation and how I read. And a lot of that has to do with, and people don't know this, but I kind of created a specific character for Mayhem. The character he's based off me, he has my name. It's more of a facet of myself. I base this character on Mayhem off of so many different people. I'm looking at Jeremy Irons as Scar in The Lion King. I'm looking at the late Jamie Bartlett as David Gennaro in Rhythm City, a South African TV series.
David Gennaro is immortal.
I'm looking at Mark Calloway, who played WWE legend The Undertaker for about 30 some odd years. I'm looking at Pip Torrens and his portrayal as the curator in the Dark Pictures Anthology video game series.
Welcome to my repository. I am the curator.
So there's just so many places and so many characters I'm pulling from in order to merge into this version of myself that I portray whenever I'm on the podcast, whenever I'm presenting. So it's just me talking slowly and me dropping the tone just a bit and pronouncing words a little clearer, because I want to reel you in. So I could go, hey, blah, 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 I could say all of that stuff, but if I slow down and I just lower my tone, suck you in a bit, it's pretty much how it works. It's very interesting how that comes up, but it's cool. It's cool.
My favorite episode in season 1 of Mayhem. Every single one is my favorite. I have to say that as the general manager. But I think specifically for me, my favorite episode will have to be... Can I give 2? Maybe let me give 2. My favorite 2 episodes so far would be the Dr. Berkeley episode. I think our work on that one was wonderful. I think the team did exceptionally good. The production quality, if you've not heard it, you should. The production quality, you would not feel like you're listening to an audio podcast. The sound effects, everything is so immersive. You would almost feel like you are listening to a movie experience, right? So for me, that's one of my key favorite episodes from this season.
And people started considering taking matters into their own hands.
But again, I can't just have one. So a second one would be Zayla Sulemana. I think it's also a story that once we started shining light on it, it was topical because a week after we released the episode or so, she was back in court. And of course, we now had documented her story in a way that people could find all the information that was a bit scattered in one place. And I think that is also testament to what we actually want to achieve with Mayhem. So for me, those are my two key episodes or favorite episodes from season 1. I know more favorite episodes will come in season 2, so let's see what we come up with.
Zayla Sulemana. Why? Because the story was quite interesting. It took me a while to understand what was really happening with that story. Because when a producer brought the story, she was trying to explain it. It was really hard to understand because the whole concept of two girls fighting over a guy and then one doing this and one doing that, quite interesting.
What is my favorite Mayhem episode, season 1? I think that would be the Zayla Sulemana story. People did not understand people did not even know about this story. And there was a time it came up on the timeline on X and people had different arguments. People were like, it's self-defense. People were like, oh, she may have done it. I like the arguments that came out of it. And you know, we're always seeing stories on Nollywood about love, things people do for love. Now we saw something happen in real life and it brought about conversations that I think were not had before. And so Zayla Sulemana's story, it's my favorite, followed closely by Atai. I think Atai's story was quite interesting.
I can tell you my least favorite one though. That would have to be Combion's story. Not because of the facts of the case. I mean, they are intriguing on its own. It was just so difficult to line certain facts and it wasn't as clear as the other ones that we've worked on. It wasn't as straightforward because you would find a lot of contradicting facts out there. And that kind of speaks to what we are talking about certain facts being lost to time. So that was very difficult. But if I had to pick a favorite, it's between Dr. Beckley and Atai. One of those two.
How do you engage with the audience on social media to foster discussions and interactions related to the true crime journey and also the podcast content?
Okay, so majority of that were creatives, more of engagement creatives, more of asking questions, putting the questions direct to people. What do they think about this? What do they think about that? Funny enough, people had a lot to say. They had opinions. They had unanswered questions. So yeah, that was what we did.
So the feedback has been overwhelmingly positive. I appreciate everyone that has given us feedback on Mayhem. We take everything in good faith, both the positive and the negative. I don't like to see the negative as negative feedback. I like to take it as constructive criticism. And all has been taken in good faith, and we promise to be back and better. But I appreciate the fact that everyone understands and appreciates the research that has gone into Mayhem, the production quality. All of these things have raised questions about the criminal system or the justice system in Ghana. And I'm happy that we finally have records in place on, on crime cases that has happened in Ghana. We did not have any of this before. Mayhem is the first Ghanaian true crime podcast, and there is more to come.
I'll go for the fact that it became the #1 true crime podcast in Ghana at some time. You would ask why that happened. That would be based on all the strategies we had across. So it would be based on the vox pop, the banners, the creative posts, the writing, the articles. Yeah, so all that. And in as much as we had that, it was the brand appeal. Obviously, right, we coming up with a true crime podcast, we had a target audience, Ghanaians who are interested in true crimes happening in Ghana. So with brand appeal, how are we going to get the message, or how are we able to get the message to the right people?
You see, that is why this podcast is needed, because I don't think that people are educated enough about our justice system. I don't think that people are educated enough, even about our criminal codes. The reason why true crime is also very, very important to me, for me, is anytime I listen, like, it's just, I am more conscious of my personal safety, at least the bit that I can do to keep myself safe. I listen to true crime stories, I learn lessons from it, and then I move with it. That's what I do. In as much as, it's fascinating, it's intriguing, you want to know where the story ended, or the big lesson that I take out is how can I quote unquote guarantee my personal safety, because I feel like I have a personal responsibility to make sure I'm safe. Also because we live in a country where, do we have to talk about the police service and the kind of service they provide? I remember a friend of mine used to say that if you don't take care of yourself in this country that we live in, and somebody kills you, you and your family may probably never get justice. And we know so many murder cases that are still in court, and that, I don't know, may or may not, the families may or may not get justice. So you listen to these stories and then you learn a thing or two from them. It's not going to be 100%. You can't, 100% protect yourself, but it triggers some common sense in your head, and you move based on the lessons that you've learned from this.
I've always been of the standpoint that what we're doing is really going back into history and pulling out what I kind of consider as lost archives, because there are so many cases out there that you would not believe exist. Case in point, Zelia Suleimana's story. It's one that could get lost to time if not documented in this way as we do. And so I take some pride in the fact that years down the road, someone could come back and listen to it and go like, okay, the person has presented context, the person has the facts readily available in this podcast. And so I think not only about the impact it's making now, but the impact down the road. And I think it's really cool what we're doing with this.
We are a society, so there are crimes in our society. People are going to continue to commit crimes. And I think that this particular content can keep giving, as the young people say. It's a gift that will keep giving. Unfortunately, I wish we will have a society that is crime-free, but I'm also a realist. So far as, that content is sitting there. And don't forget, because we again, this is, it wasn't common. I'm not going to say that it wasn't happening in Ghana, but it wasn't common. People putting out content like that. There's always going to be stories to talk about. There's always going to be content to talk about. So really, it's like a gold mine in terms of content.
Season 2 of Mayhem. Expect nothing but the best. It's going to be more than what we did, and it's going to cover a lot.
Mayhem started as a podcast. It will still be a podcast. It will be available as audio on demand. But what we are doing for season 2, we are adding a bit more of razzmatazz, if I should say, to it. We are adding video content to it. So season 2 will be more in video format. Which means that the distribution also will be able to put some cuts of it now across our traditional media platforms, so TV and radio, for it to be able to reach even more people. Because the stories we tell via Mayhem are important stories that should be available to every single person, and everybody should be able to pick something from those episodes. But of course, we are also on the digital side of things. We are consistently innovating. We want to be able to partner with some key IVR partners to put that audio also on demand. We are looking at the best innovations that we can utilize to make sure that Mayhem reaches every single person. So I think for season 2, everybody should expect that everywhere you turn, on digital platforms especially, you'll be able to enjoy your favorite episode of Mayhem on demand and also sometimes live.
Season 2 would be back and better, with better production quality, stories you've never heard before. More conversations will come about, cases or stories that have happened in Ghana with regards to crime. So watch out.
Lock your doors. This is mayhem.
Lock your doors. This is mayhem.
Always make sure to lock your doors because this is mayhem.
Lock your doors. This is mayhem.